So the next session will be is titled Roles and Opportunities of State Transmission Authorities. We have received so much interest in conversations at NASEO among a lot of state energy offices about trying to understand more about the roles of state transmission authorities. And so we're thrilled to have three examples from different parts of the country that can share with us their experiences with their respective state transmission authorities. So first, I'd like to introduce Claire Veguesa, and I hope I pronounced that correctly.
Close.
Close.
Biggest.
Okay. And he's the executive director of the North Dakota Transmission Authority, and he'll be followed by Jeremy Lewis, who serves as deputy director of New Mexico's Energy Conservation and Management Division, also known as the State Energy Office. And then he'll be followed by James Lester, who serves as senior policy lead on transmission, climate, and energy for the Colorado Energy Office. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Claire to kick off the discussion. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Catherine and NASEO, and it's been awesome. I really enjoyed listening to the session so far. I do want to steal that information that Amy shared. That would be very helpful in educating our policymakers. So next slide there. North Dakota Transmission Authority is 20 years old now. It was established in 2005. And the driver at that time was wind energy. And this was before the utilities had joined regional transmission organizations. So the renewable industry, and particularly wind, was really struggling to get interconnections, finding roadblocks. So they established the Transmission Authority to help with that. As far as the organizational structure, the office of the Transmission Authority is within the Industrial Commission. I'm on the 14th floor of the Capitol. I got a beautiful view. And just in this last biennium, the budget for the Transmission Authority was added to the Industrial Commission. Prior to that, it was funded by a grant program through the Lignite Energy Council. And as the executive director, I'm an appointed person. I'm a contractor. I'm the only person in the department or the agency. Over the last 20 years, there's been a lot of directors. My predecessor, though, was the first director that had an engineering background and came from the power industry. And I'm the first executive director to have transmission experience and engineering experience from that sector. So it's been very enjoyable. I retired and I do this part-time, about 50% of the time. And I come into the office with an advantage. As you know, there's a lot of acronyms in this business, and I understood those before I come in. So, and also understanding a lot who does what and where. And I did coin one more acronym, and I call that TUTMA. They use too many acronyms. So the next slide. This slide just describes the organizational structure. The North Dakota Industrial Commission, which makes up the governor, the attorney general, and the ag commissioner, are my bosses. And they have a staff, administrative staff, the Industrial Commission, that helps facilitate these programs. But there's 16 agencies or programs within this realm that's guided by these three leaders. And some of them are grant programs. Those are the ones in green. North Dakota does own two businesses, a mill and elevator, mills wheat into flour, and they also the state owns a bank, and the Industrial Commission also oversees them. So there are some other agencies, and you can see Transmission Authority is just one of those. The most similar agency or program is a Pipeline Authority. And I noticed in some of the others that they have advisory committees or boards. Um, the Transmission Authority does not have a board. It's just me, myself, and I, and reporting to the governor and the attorney general and ag commissioner. So next slide. There's a statutory authorities. It's very, very broad. We can make grants, loans, we can issue up to $800 million in revenue bonds. We can own things, we can lease things, we can sell things. We can enter into contracts to build, maintain, or even operate a transmission system. And then we can do planning and participate in regional transmission organizations. With that being said, although we have all these opportunities to participate, our first choice is to yield to the private sector to get these things done. On that list, we have financed one line when Great River Energy, a cooperative, sold their coal plant to Rainbow Energy, a merchant. We financed the transmission line, a high voltage DC line that goes from North Dakota to Minneapolis. And then I'm also required to file a report with the North Dakota Legislative Council and, of course, the Industrial Commission on the activities of the agency, and also submit an annual report on the resilience of the electric grid in North Dakota. Next one. So because of even the evolution of the background of the director and then the changing landscape of the utilities, energy business, the work has really transitioned a lot over the last 3 to 4 years. Prior, the executive directors were more policy driven and probably working about 15 to 20% of the time, and now it's closer to 50% of the time. But we've conducted studies. In 2024, we did resource adequacy studies, the impact of the greenhouse gas rule and mercury and air toxic standards on the grid reliability of North Dakota. We've done load forecast studies, and we just completed a transmission capacity and large load impact study on North Dakota. And so I spend a lot of time following the RTOs, attending meetings, attending committee meetings. I pledge to visit every utility and every developer that's working in North Dakota annually, and also participate with the regulators on regular, like 3 to 4 times a year. We meet with the RTOs here in the capital. And then maybe probably a greater part of my job of late is just in educating and informing policymakers and communities. As more and more transmission and pipelines and energy projects are getting developed, landowners are raising more concerns, even though compared to many of you, we have a lot of open space, of course, but yet landowners have concerns. And then I really try to simplify the messages for policymakers. They need to know about social services, bridges, roads, schools, and a host of topics. And so I try to work to simplify the messages to help them make policy decisions and help facilitate the growth of transmission and generation in North Dakota. My agency also is a recipient of the IIJA grant funds, DOE grant funds, so we administer those as well. I guess my message is it's really complex. At the last session, the question was asked, do you do studies or shoot, what was it? Catherine, help me out. Oh, shoot.
Yeah, there was a question about what kind of
Planning studies.
Yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
planning studies. So I'm going to tell you just my view is that there's a lot of people doing a lot of things. And so I try being a one-man show or a half a man show. I really work to try to identify where I can find the information and not duplicate the information. So like with we did this capacity study, and although, I mean, it was an independent look, I don't know that we'll do another one because we can get the same information from MISO or SPP. But I think it was a good test. And doing those studies is extremely complex. They have floors of engineers doing it. We just can't handle that. And it's getting increasingly complex just because transmission and generation is tight, and there's so much dynamics in both the load and in generation development that it's very, very complex. So I try to find other people that are doing the work and translate that and simplify it to share it with our policymakers. I think it's really exciting times for us. There's billions of dollars being spent on generation and also on transmission. And for North Dakota, we have two very exciting high voltage DC line projects. Minnesota Power Elite is upgrading their line from North Dakota to Duluth from 550 megawatts to 900 megawatts, and then Grid United's North Plains connector is adding 3,000 megawatts of interregional transmission. That's a high voltage DC line that crosses three different operating regions: the West Interconnect, SPP, and MISO. So lots of exciting things. I was in the utility industry for nearly 40 years, and it was never this exciting. So anyway, that's kind of a synopsis of what we do and how we've evolved over the last few years.
Well, thank you, Claire. That's fantastic. A great overview. And now we're going to hear from your counterpart in New Mexico, Jeremy Lewis, Deputy Director with the New Mexico Energy Conservation and Management Division. So I will hand it over to you, Jeremy.
Thanks, Claire. Thanks, Catherine. Hello, everybody. My name is Jeremy, and I'm the Deputy Director, as Catherine mentioned. And we are a team of about 40 people in Santa Fe and Albuquerque, forwarding renewable energy, energy efficiency, alternative fuels, and the safe transportation of radioactive waste in New Mexico. Really happy to be here speaking about the Renewable Energy Transmission Authority. And Camille, please move it to the next slide. Great. Yeah, so the Renewable Energy Transmission Authority mission is we facilitate planning, financing, developing, and acquiring high voltage transmission lines and energy storage projects to promote the expansion of carbon-free renewable energy in New Mexico and neighboring states in the region for economic development. We do have an Energy Transition Act that was passed in 2019 here in New Mexico. It requires cooperatives and investor-owned utilities to power their systems with 50% renewable energy by 2030 and increment up to 80% renewable energy by 2040. And then by 2045, to have 100% zero carbon on the grid for investor-owned utilities. And for the cooperative electrical utilities, the 100% zero carbon goal is 2050. So that relates to RETA, and I'll show you how. Please, the next slide. So RETA was formed in 2007 under Governor Bill Richardson as an economic development tool. And the reason why I'm here today is I'm one of these board members. I was appointed about 5 years ago by the governor. And so that's my role as far as being a state energy office employee, helping with the leadership of this transmission authority. We also have the secretary of our department as a board member for the transmission authority as well. Next slide, please. So since the 80s, New Mexico's grid, probably like many of the states, New Mexico's grid has been largely unchanged. Interestingly, here you'll see on the map that we have both the eastern and western interconnections in our state. The Southwest Power Pool is part of the eastern connection, and the rest is part of the western grid. And we'll pivot to the next slide here, where you'll see our resource, which is really tremendous, 137 gigawatts of developable land. That's state land and private land for wind, and 824 gigawatts of potential on the state and private land for solar. So tremendous resource, paired with a 1980s style grid, really helped to motivate the creation of RETA and help RETA stick with it through the tough patches. And now we're really reached our stride and having an impact in the state. And if you switch to the next slide, talk about that impact a little bit. The biggest impact and the what we're hearing from developers as the biggest benefit of partnering with RETA is the tax incentives, the gross receipts and compensating tax deductions and property tax exemption seems to be the biggest traction, the most attractive piece of the puzzle for developers. There's other benefits that are really helpful as well, including relationships with our government counterparts at the land office, with 13 million acres of surface land under their stewardship, with the Department of Transportation, with the Rio Grande Conservancy District, and other state and tribal and local agencies. There's streamlined permitting to be had without skirting environmental requirements. There's also the power of eminent domain that RETA has, but has never flexed it on. I can say that eminent domain's only been used to clean up as a cleanup tool on parcels that didn't have clear title. There's never been a full flexing of the eminent domain piece. There's bond financing, of course, but it's not often used, and it also help in reducing regulatory burden. Next slide, please. So there's four levels of project relationship. The first level is a non-disclosure agreement for any developer that approaches RETA. We do require a non-disclosure agreement so that we're able to talk freely about their proposed project, but also about the other proposed projects that may relate to their proposed development. Any relationship beyond the NDA does require the board approval. This is including a letter of support or memorandum of understanding, or the full-fledged acquisition where RETA will actually acquire the project and co-develop it and generate a lease agreement to do so. Importantly, at the bottom of this slide, you'll see that RETA projects must transmit or store at least 30% of their energy from renewable energy resources. And importantly, most of RETA's projects plan to have 100% renewable resources to transmit or store. In addition to transmission storage, energy storage is also part of the mandate for RETA. Next slide, please. Great. So here's a map of New Mexico with the list of transmission projects. The Western Spirit project is a 150-mile, 345 kV AC line that was it reached commercial operation in 2021, and that has an 800 megawatt capacity. You can't see the other existing transmission, but you do see that there's a U shape of this Western Spirit, and it connects with other transmission lines to create the coveted loop. So creating loops in transmission helps tremendously. and that was part of the engineering and the design and layout of this Western Spirit line. The SunZia line, you may have heard about that. It's expected actually to be completed very soon. They're wrapping it up, and in 2026, they'll be activating that line connected to 3.4 gigawatts of new wind resources in central New Mexico, exporting it to markets west. That's a 550-mile line, DC line, 525 kV DC line it originates here in central New Mexico and terminates just west of Tucson to connect with other transmission. We have the Crossroad Hobbs Roadrunner, which is indicated by CHR on the bottom right here. This is in development, and it's part of the Southwest Power Pool, and is a 140-mile double circuit 345 kV alternating current line capable of carrying 1,500 megawatts. And this is, SunZia may have been the longest lead time. I think it started in 2008 and it's just completed next year. This Crossroad Hobbs Roadrunner line is also due to be completed next year, but it just started 2 years ago. So tremendously different timeline on that for a number of reasons, but it's really impressive to see a project swiftly implemented. Real Soul is along this, is another transmission line that's parallel to the SunZia, so another project on that corridor, but not a DC line. This Real Soul will have more on and off ramps. It's an alternating current line, 1,500 megawatts. Of the Mora line, Lucky, it's indicated as Lucky Mora here on the map, is 116 miles. It's estimated to be completed in 2027. A 345 kV alternating current, along with a 115 kV alternating current line, capable of carrying 182 megawatts. And I'll point out that this northeast corner of New Mexico, and really the whole eastern flank of New Mexico, is wind resource rich. Similarly, this central part of New Mexico, before this transmission got built in, was really an inaccessible pocket of what I like to call grade A wind, some of the best terrestrial-based wind resource on the continent. And by building this transmission, it helped to access this wind resource. So the North Path is also on this map. It is a 400-mile, and you see it's kind of a braided line, so they haven't landed on the route yet. But it connects the wind resource in northeastern New Mexico to the transmission infrastructure formerly used by coal power plants in the northwest part of the state to export renewable energy to markets west. And the North Path line is proposed to be a 525 kilovolt DC line capable of carrying 4,000 megawatts. And its estimated completion date is 2032. So that one's still in development. Also in development is this Hidden Mountain connection. It's a 21-mile connection capable of carrying 1,000 megawatts, but is estimated to be completed in 2028. And then two more to share. South Line, which is not on the map, but it's in the southwest corner of the state, Doña Ana, Luna, Grant, and Hidalgo counties. That's a 278-mile, 500 kV alternating current line that's capable, excuse me, I misspoke. The South Line is a 108-mile, 345 kV alternating current line capable of carrying 1,500 megawatts. I don't have a completion date on that one. It's still under development. And then last but not least on the list here is this Eastern New Mexico connector. It's not on the map, but it's along the middle of the state, running east to west, 278 miles, 500 kV alternating current line capable of carrying 3,000 megawatts. So if we go to the next slide, all that information is there for reference. obviously, New Mexico is exporting its energy. We have about 2 million people here with a peak load of less than 4,000 megawatts. So we're really talking economic development for these lines. And part and parcel, though, we'll be meeting our Energy Transition Act requirements. And we're on track to do that. And go to the next slide, please. Great. So this highlights the 16.5 gigawatts of transmission capacity. Adding up all of the transmission capacity, all those lines, it's really maximizing our capabilities to make use of our wind and our solar resources, primarily wind at this point, maybe more solar, but mostly the solar is being built closer to the load and not being exported. I've got a couple, two more slides. Next one, please. Great. So as I mentioned, it's primarily an economic development tool, and there's billions of dollars of transmission projects and thousands of jobs. That's just some of the benefits of completing projects. RETA is the central link that helps these projects get built and to upgrade the grid, and supports the Energy Transition Act. And there's a list of jobs, including the one on the picture here, which is these guys on the lift installing the line on the SunZia line here. Go to the last slide. I'll put in a plug here. If you do go to this website, the Renewable Energy Transmission Authority is currently hiring for a technical policy advisor. So if you're interested or know folks that are willing to help ripple the message, please do so. We're looking for a person with technical skills, but also policy skills. And thanks for listening. That's my presentation.
Thank you so much, Jeremy. Really appreciate your thorough overview of RETA. So now we'll turn to James Lester, Senior Policy Lead on Transmission, Climate, and Energy for the Colorado Energy Office, and on the board of the Colorado Transmission Authority, I believe. So take it away, James.
Yeah, thank you, Catherine. And thanks everyone for the opportunity to share an overview of Colorado's ever-changing transmission planning and policy environment. I'm going to be a little bit shorter than my colleagues because CETA has been in existence for a very, very short amount of time. But again, my name is James Lester, Senior Advisor here at CEO. I lead our work on transmission and wholesale market participation. As Catherine mentioned, and as like Jeremy, I serve on the board of CETA on the behalf of our energy office. And a little bit of a background, our office is part of Governor Polis's administration. He appoints our director, and we strive to implement his policies at the General Assembly and at the various regulatory agencies. As state energy offices, we all pretty much face the same chicken and egg problem. Many of us have ambitious emission requirements, and we are pretty much all facing increased electricity demand, but we often lack the physical grid capacity to deliver that power. Next slide. So to kind of understand CETA's mandate, we must start with the policy drivers. Our climate policy is focused on reducing greenhouse gas emissions, as well as reducing consumer energy costs. And we do this by advancing clean energy, energy efficiency, and zero emission vehicles. The state has set ambitious goals of reducing GHG emissions by 26% by 2025, 50% by 2030, and achieving net zero emissions by 2050. I'm sorry, it looks like my slide got a little bit fouled up there for whatever reason. I think the conversion from PowerPoint to PDF might have fouled that up, but next slide. These targets were codified by our legislature in House Bill 19-1261 and updated recently in 2023. As you can see, the steps get steeper as we move forward. We're looking at an 80% reduction by 2030 from our electric utilities and ultimately net zero for the entire economy by 2050. The challenge we face is while our generation planning via our utilities electric resource plans are very robust, our transmission planning has been fragmented and really lagging behind these statutory guidelines. Next slide. And one thing we recently did here at the office was conducting pathways to deep dark decarbonization by 2040. This was a study to understand the physical generation needed to hit our upcoming targets. The study evaluated pathways to the deep dark decarbonization of our electrical grid by 2040. We modeled 7 different paths to get deeper GHG emission reductions that included a business as usual case, along with 6 other scenarios that represent different paths to zero emissions. The modeling show that we can reach a 94% reduction in the electricity sector at no incremental cost relative to business as usual. However, the physical build out required is very massive. To hit our targets, we need to add 5.5 gigawatts of wind, 11 gigawatts of solar, and 9 gigawatts of storage. And to put that in perspective, that's about 3 times the amount of existing wind and 5 times the amount of existing solar. And this modeling projected a 3% annual load growth, mostly due to building and electrical and vehicle electrification. As we all know, that number could very well increase due to the electricity demands from industrial loads such as data centers. But that could require an additional analysis. But did want to note, well, the study didn't actually model transmission needs. We do know that in order to meet these huge numbers that we're going to have to build a lot of transmission to meet these our growing electricity needs. Next slide. So recognizing that the existing utility planning processes might not build the transmission fast enough or the right places, the legislature passed Senate Bill 21072. The bill created the Colorado Electric Transmission Authority, and it was modeled after reviewing the success of RETA. And I when we were planning this panel, I made sure to Catherine that I wanted to follow Jeremy's great presentation on RETA, because we are just following in RETA's footsteps. We're very early in the process, but learning a lot from RETA. So some of our key powers, CETA can identify and establish new transmission corridors. It has the authority to negotiate interstate corridors. It can enter into public-private partnerships to select operators to finance and build lines. And crucially, CETA does have the ability to issue revenue bonds and also allows the use of eminent domain in limited circumstances. We really see CETA as a backstop developer when the market fails to step up. One other note on Senate Bill 072, it also directed our regulated utilities to join a qualifying organized wholesale market by January 1st of 2030. This is unless they can demonstrate that certain exceptions are met, and they would need a waiver from the Colorado PUC. Next slide. It's important to recognize that CETA is not a regulatory agency like our PUC, nor is it a division of the governor's office. It's an independent special purpose authority, essentially a political subdivision of the state. It's governed by a 9-member independent board, including the director of the energy office, who has actually designated me as a representative, 2 members appointed by the governor, 3 members appointed by the Speaker of the House, and one must represent labor interests, one must represent commercial industrial customers, and one must have utility expertise, excuse me. And then finally, 3 members are appointed by the President of the Senate. It's important to note that, as we all know, private utilities really prioritize the rate of return for shareholders or minimizing impact to ratepayers. CETA will prioritize statewide reliability, clean energy goals, and economic development. This will allow the authority to look at multi-value projects that might be economically challenging for a single utility, but will provide immense value to the state grid as a whole. We are also basing our partnership levels on RETA's established, and we're currently establishing 3 different levels and should be finalizing that fairly soon. Next slide. Late last year, CETA was appropriated some funding by the legislature to develop a comprehensive transmission capacity expansion study. The results were pretty eye-opening. To meet our 20-year reliability and economic needs, the state will require a capital investment of approximately $4.5 billion. A gap analysis that was part of the study showed that 44% of those necessary projects were not in any utility's current 10-year plan. The study identified a portfolio of 550 miles of new greenfield lines and 3,000 miles of reconductoring or rebuilding existing lines. Next slide. Here's a map that illustrates some of the corridors and conceptual projects that were identified in our study. We are currently utilizing tools, specifically our partnerships, and establishing our revenue bonding authority, hopefully to move from study to actual implementation execution of some development. We are in the process of selecting specific projects, looking closely at the San Luis Valley and in eastern Colorado, where the renewable potential is very high, but export capacity is currently maxed out. We also have certain areas, and particularly in the Southwest, that are also have a lot of transmission capacity issues. Again, we are operationalizing our eminent domain and notification policies to ensure that we are ready if voluntary negotiation fails. But as with Rita, that remains a very last resort that we don't anticipate really acting on. Next slide. So we know that transmission projects often fail, not because of engineering, but because of local opposition. With that in mind, in October 2024, our board, with the help of GridWorks, which is a nonprofit kind of organization, adopted our community engagement principles that will serve as a contractual requirement for any developer partnering with us. This contains 4 pillars: information sharing, which will require a public repository of all project data and a total transparency commitment on behalf of CETA and the developer on siting decisions. Our communication pillar is that engagement must happen before permits are filed. This includes private meetings with local and tribal governments. Community benefits, where we will advocate for tangible financial benefits. Really important to leave the community better off than it was before, particularly maybe through broadband access or road improvements. And finally, accountability, requiring long-term dispute resolution processes that last throughout the operation of the line, not just during construction. So as I mentioned, CETA still in very early stages, finalizing our policies and really looking to 2026 to really get some boots on the ground and get some transmission starting to be built here in the state. So next slide, and I'm happy to answer any questions. I will put the website of CETA into the chat, and that has a link to our community engagement principles as well as our transmission capacity study. So happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much, James. That was a fantastic overview. And I think it's fantastic to hear 3 different examples that have some shared approaches and initiatives that also have some differences.